Hello and welcome back to ThoughtBot's AI in Focus, where we explore tools, techniques of implementing or using AI in our products or our tool set. And today I'm joined by previous ThoughtBot developer and now you're out in the world doing other things, Damian Galarza. Damian, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
And speaking of those other things that you've been doing, you've been on a health care journey for the last few years, where you've worked on a few different products, but got exposed to FDA-regulated software products and learned a lot about that. And we're going to be exploring that today through the lens of a Claude code skill.
That's right. Yeah.
So as you got exposed to this, what did you learn?
Yeah. So when I was at Bowie, we built our first like 510K software as a medical device. And so that is software that has to go through FDA review before it can be used in production. And a lot of that entails a lot of documentation. So we have what's called specifically a design history file, where you have to kind of track all of the requirements, user needs, your design, your specifications, and everything along the way. So as it sounds, it could be a kind of tedious process to generate all of that.
And traditionally that would be done by hand.
Correct. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And how granular is it? Like if we're thinking about a Rails app with models and controllers and everything, what actually gets documented in a 510K process?
Yeah, so it can go all the way down to the individual modules and classes that are involved in some of the processes and decision making. So if we take like the example I've used in the past is like an authentication system, it might look through and trace through the different classes that are involved and the paths that the user might take along the way and how they get there, as well as kind of like tracing to external services and how those interfaces connect and things like that.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to dig into this today. I'm monitoring the chat. If you have questions or comments along the way for us, I would definitely drop them in the chat and we'll see them. Damian, you've been starting to stream on your own as well. So that YouTube link to your channel is in the show notes for this episode. So have you been enjoying streaming?
I've been enjoying it a lot, actually. It's been fun to do another creative outlet. I've used to do a lot of blog posts, and so now this is kind of my first take at doing YouTube videos and streaming.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. So we are going. So Claude skills came out, I guess, in October, right?
That's right.
Um, and how would you describe them to someone who hasn't used it before?
Yeah. So skills, like at the surface, are pretty kind of basic. They're a folder, and each one has at least a skill.md or a markdown file. And in there, you can have some YAML front matter. So that has a title and a description. And then the rest of it is the body, which is basically kind of like a set of instructions that your agent, in our this case Claude, can follow along. So you can have, like, say, specific workflows, or just kind of like maybe brand guidelines, things like that, that Claude should follow whenever it's reading that.
Mm-hmm. In some ways, that high level thing, or a way to think about it in general, is it's a little bit like when we're programming against an LLM and we set up tools where it's like, I have these tools available to me, and then they can do things, and the LLM knows, oh, well, we're trying to do this kind of thing. I have this tool available. And so skills are essentially a way to set up a bunch of things using markdown files in Claude, where you basically have the high level one and you say, like, here's the kinds of things you know how to do. And then you can go into it. And when you can set up Claude skills in everywhere you can run Claude. So on the browser, in the cloud, or in Claude Code locally. And when you run it locally, you could even then run scripts and that kind of thing as well from them. So that's what we're going to do today. We are going to create some Claude skills to help us as developers document the changes that we're making, and that kind of thing along the way, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because that's one of the things that I found. I think historically, medical devices end up kind of being a little more waterfall, where they expect a lot of documentation up front. And I think
Mm-hmm.
these things can help with like more agile workflows where you're, working iteratively, you're getting that documentation generated and not having to also go back like at the end of the day or at the end of the line to then retroactively add that documentation.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Well, we're going to go over to your screen, and you're driving today, which is a nice change of pace for me.
Cool. So this is a project. Traceful AI will add this in here. So to start, to add a skill inside your .claude folder in a project, there's actually a skills folder that if it's not there, you can create. And that's where the skills can live. So I'm going to go ahead and for the purposes of this, I'll call it SDS documentation. And we'll make that a skill.md. And so now we need our YAML front matter. And so we need a title. Where's it name? Let me look at another one to reference. Claude skills code. And yeah, name SDS documentation. And then the description. And the description is like the important piece because this is how Claude's going to know when to use it. So the rest of the body is not included in the context window. Claude has to actually determine when to call this, and it will use the description to determine that. So I think for now, we'll just say like used to generate 510K SDS documentation. We'll leave it kind of generic for now, but we can always come back and iterate on that.
Right. Yeah. So to call that out explicitly, that YAML front matter is essentially the only thing that's loaded into context for each of the skills that you have. And that's essentially like what we were saying in terms of like, you're basically telling Claude what tools you have available in that same way. So, yeah.
Yeah. And so now in the body, we can kind of describe, in our case, maybe a workflow for how we want some of this documentation to be generated. So This is very much like just prompting an LLM, so coming up with like a useful prompt. And so I think we'll go with like your goal is to generate SDS documentation for FDA 510K submission. Given, I think the easiest way to start is potentially having it target maybe a specific architecture. So we'll say, given a request, generate the following documentation in Markdown formats. And so we'll say, we'll have like software architecture. We'll say we want a high level overview of components, modules, and their, we'll say interactions. And then we will have a detailed design. And so that's where you actually dive into the maybe the more closer details of each piece of the module. So detailed specifications per module. And we'll have likely some data structure and database schema design. How data is organized, stored, and flows. And I think we can maybe start with that and see what we come up with, and then we can maybe iterate on some other pieces that maybe go along the way.
Sure. Yeah.
So let's try that.
I imagine that just by telling Claude that we're generating 510K documentation of the SDS stuff, it's gonna know a lot of extra stuff from that.
Go here, Claude. So if we run context, we can verify that it's here. Okay, here it is, SDS documentation. So SDS. And one of the things that recently they actually combined skills and commands. So now with that, you can either hope that Claude knows to call it or actually explicitly call it. So we'll say SDS documentation, authentication system. And so let's see what it comes up with. So I'll analyze the authentication system in a Rails application and generate SDS documentation for 510K submission. Cool.
So we have a question in the chat, and while Tracewell is a Rails application that we're working on, so people can find more about that at tracewell.ai, I believe.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a closed source Rails application, but then we're using on the screen now is Claude Code and Vim, I guess, right?
Yep, that's right.
Running in Tmux.
Yes.
We can include links to all those things, but that's fairly typical sort of developer setup for those of us who haven't switched to like something like Visual Studio Code or another editor lately. That allows you to run multiple things in a terminal window together. And have you explored other editors, Damian?
So I was on a cursor kick for a little while when it was first came out before Claude Code was out, and it was hard for me to get used to, honestly, because I've been such a long-term Vim user. But I had to really force myself to do it. And then when Claude Code came out, and someone convinced me to try it out, then I was like, all right, I'm back in the terminal.
Right. Yeah, Claude Code is really interesting because it is, has a really strong terminal support. It fits in a lot of workflows that maybe have made it more compelling to people at Thoughtbot who traditionally would be in Tmux and Vim and everything. So being able to be right at home in that ecosystem as opposed to moving to a different editor has I think greased the wheels for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's also nice. You can actually integrate Claude Code in an IDE also, like VS Code, if you needed to, or if you felt more comfortable that way.
Yeah. So what it's been doing is reading in a lot of stuff now because it's the first time we've run it, so it has no context, right?
That's right. Yeah. So it's got to go ahead and do an exploration of all the files, kind of determine what pieces are part of the authentication system, so that it can then kind of pull it all together and generate its documentation.
Mm-hmm. And I think in general, these kinds of skills, while we're looking at this as a lens of FDA required documentation, I know that there are, even if in a non FDA regulated scenario, we're seeing more and more value in being able to keep documentation up to date automatically in the applications that we work in.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like it's like now easier to do that with these tools also, because like I think one of the problems before was as soon as you wrote the documentation, it could easily get out of date. But if you
Right.
have like these automations, it can help you like keep that up to speed or up to date without having to put a lot of effort into it.
Yeah. So in general, when you're working on these systems, do you prefer to keep a version of the documentation in the repo alongside of the Rails app?
So when we were doing that before, we weren't. I have
Mm-hmm.
seen some projects where that is the case. So I think it depends on the scenario. So we were at the time using Notion to do a lot of our documentation and keep that there, mainly because it also helped us. The problem I saw with like keeping it in the code base for us was that we also needed collaboration from our regulatory department, our regulatory team, and others there. So having to get them into Git and GitHub would be a bit of a blocker, or a harder, at least, barrier
Mm-hmm.
to entry. So having it externalized was easier for us.
Mm-hmm. So it is generating the documentation now.
Yeah. And we only asked for a small section, authentication. Here we go. I'll have it write it, and then we can open it in Vim to see it easier. So I see where it's saving it to. Okay, it's gonna send it in. Okay, sounds good.
Now, and when it comes to the Rails app itself, is it using a gem for authentication?
It is not. So using the what do you call it? Has secure password functionality
Mm-hmm.
built into Rails.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. So it generated an SDS for authentication system. Like you had said, I didn't actually give it this format for doing something, but this is actually a typical kind of 510K formatting where there's like a prefix, in this case SDS, and then auth 001. So you have like these identifiers for something.
Mm-hmm.
Versioning, that's also important, as well as the date when it was generated. So here's a classification. So this probably isn't exactly right necessarily, but every piece of software has like a different classification, which kind of comes up to like risk levels and tolerance based off like what it's doing. And it looks like some regulatory context, CFR part 820. That's cool. Document control. That's an important part of this document as well. So making sure that you're tracking changes along the way, because that's one of the things that the FDA cares a lot about, is making sure that like there's a history of your decision making and how you've gotten to where you are. And let's see. So jumping to the introduction for that. Yep. So it's covering the authentication and credential verification, multi-factor auth, how session management works, some terms and acronyms, some references, and then here's some diagrams even. So it actually went pretty well, like even just kind of like figuring out what kind of diagram without me really giving it too much to go
Mm-hmm.
off of.
And
Um,
based on what you know, does this all seem accurate?
yeah. So I mean, like we don't necessarily in Tracewell have a mobile client, or that's probably the only piece out of these four that's there. Otherwise, the middleware, this is all accurate. Controller layer, sessions, password. Yep, this is all right. Oops, going the wrong way. These are correct also. So it's captured rate limiting services. So that's another piece that the FDA is going to be interested in, is how what kind of security measures you have in place for things like, say, people gaining access to things that they shouldn't have access to. So that's good. The model layer, so it's showing us the relationships between these. That's good. So middleware components. So
Michaela
yeah.
has a great question in the
Mhm.
chat. We may get to it, but basically, I think they notice you're using linear too. So the question is, how do you trace back requirements to each linear ticket for full traceability?
Yeah. So that would probably be something we want to extend the skill into
Yeah,
and have ways
exactly.
to identify what pieces of code go into. So one thing you could potentially do to make this more robust is actually set up. So I like to use the linear MCP a lot.
Hmm.
And if you instructed the skill to actually use the linear MCP to maybe fetch information about maybe issues and stories, things like that, you could then have like a full traceability list out for those things.
Yeah. Maybe we can dig into that a little bit more as we build out the skill. If
Yeah,
not for real, then at least talking through how these can piece together those things.
totally.
Cool. That's a great question, Michaela. Thank you.
Let's see. Okay, this is what I was hoping to see, maybe some flow diagrams, so an actual user flow of like what's happening and how these different services are interacting with one another. Um, it's caught the two-factor is enabled or not, how that goes. So I feel like this was a pretty good start. How multi-tenancy goes. Nice. And here's some data modeling. So probably one of the things I'd want to do here, I'd say these like create tables. This is probably a little too detailed for what I'd
Hmm.
want. Probably just table diagrams would be sufficient for something like that, ERDs. And I think the markdown kind of representations are great, but not really usable outside of, say, if I was trying to actually export this
Right.
for the FDA. So I think maybe using something like Mermaid is another kind of option as well. And so we've gone into security controls, some requirements. So again, it's kind of making some assumptions here where it's like, yeah, auth 001. So it's not actually, it'd be nice if this was kind of linking back to a linear or something like
Hmm.
that. And also, so Tracefall itself is not a software as a medical device. So it's kind of
Right.
making some assumptions based off that, where if this was a real medical device, you'd actually have these specific requirements that are documented somewhere
Hmm.
to link these things to.
And you might start off with that being in like your Claude MD file for the application itself.
Sure. Okay. So let's see. Claude skills SDS skill. And I think it did a pretty good job here. What are some of the things we should refine? I think database schema do not include actual SQL output. Um, let's say diagrams. When generating diagrams, use Mermaid JS formatting.
Now, in theory, when it comes to Claude skills, you can sort of go down the rabbit hole here because you could say, here's a skill for generating diagrams, right?
For sure. Yep.
And as with anything, it's important not to go overboard because then you're all over the place. And so it's especially when you're getting started, what I recommend is like just get it out, get it in one place, and then if later on you realize, oh, I'm reusing this or I'm saying that in multiple places, then you might extract it into another skill itself.
Exactly.
It's very
And one
similar to
of
actually programming as
yep,
well. You don't want to over abstract.
for sure. And even for like the individual skill itself, like I think the Claude documentation mentions like a 500 line limit, like not really a limit, but kind of like guideline
Hmm.
for the skill MD. And so like if you find yourself going past that, that might be a decision point where you can actually have a folder called resources and then like have other markdown files inside of there that go into detail on specific pieces. So if you find yourself going down that path, that might be useful too.
Yeah.
Um, do we want to try to link up linear and see how that works as we go?
Yeah. If you don't think it's too much,
Let's try it. Detail design. Let's go 4. Use the linear MCP to search for related issues to link via their ID as traceability links. And then I think the only thing is it's going to restart from the beginning, I think, but that's okay. 5 is, let's do that. And actually, you know what? We'll try a different, instead of authentication, we'll run it against something different.
Okay.
So let's add also, I need to do inner interface specifications. So here I want to identify internal APIs, external integrations, and user interfaces. Oops.
Yeah, when it comes to the linear thing, I wasn't sure whether you actually had a linear setup that
I
would
do.
have data in it that would make sense. So if you
I
do,
do.
that's great.
Yeah. So I was powering most of my workflow while building this using linear.
Okay, cool.
Um, so we'll have to get those changes, we'll have to exit Claude. Let me make sure it's connected. I think it is. Yep. Okay. Oh no, linear is disabled. Enable. Connecting.
So for folks, while that connects, in the last several streams of I think it was in November, we were working on building an MCP server into our Rails app, and so that we might, in our product, offer features like the linear MCP. So it's a service exposing an MCP interface so that clients from local local clients in our development lifecycle, in the tools that we use, might reach out to our service and be able to use it directly from the LLM. And it's great that Linear has that.
All right, perfect. All right, cool. Just want to make sure I had the right linear connected. All right, so let's do SDS documentation, DHF artifact extraction. So the DHF artifact extraction, this is what Tracewell is built off of. So the premise for that, so yes, is that Tracewell is aiming to connect tools like, say, Linear or Jira to your issues, and then help you kind of generate some of the DHF or design history file documentation along the way. So like user needs, design inputs, things like that to help streamline the documentation process.
Right. Or even just, so correct me if I'm wrong, but like say for example you have an original design document and specifications and all that stuff, and then the app is live and a bug comes in. So that's that you have the bug ticket, and you need to be able to basically connect those dots and say, we made this change because of this bug, and here's how it was, and document how it what the change was, right?
100%, that's correct. Yeah, and if you need any maybe documentation updates along the way, you might have to update those. And yeah, you have to definitely have that documentation in place for any resolutions like that. Okay, so now it's going through all of the architecture again, and looks like it's trying to find some stuff inside of linear. Didn't find it the first time, so now it's trying a few different queries.
So we're running this locally in with Claude Code. Um, there, you could also envision a scenario where this is essentially run as part of continuous integration
Exactly.
on a
Yeah.
server.
And these, you can also add skills like you mentioned. So you can do it in the web, you can do it in Claude Code. You can also, the Anthropic API, you can upload, say, skills to Anthropic to then have them available to your API calls if you're using the Anthropic API in that way to leverage skills there too,
Yep.
which is kind of what I have envisioned, at least for something like this, is like, because I use Anthropic behind the scenes for Tracewell, is being able to say, upload this skill and have that up there for processing things.
Mm-hmm. As this is an aside question, but I know have seen that you're using the Axis tenant gem for multi-tenant functionality. I haven't used that gem for a while. How has it been?
It's been working well. I tried a different one. I can't remember what it was called, and I was having some issues at the time. But Acta's tenant has been working pretty well.
Cool.
Oh, apartment. That was the one I was using
Oh
before.
yeah, yeah.
That was not. I was having a bunch of issues with that. Mainly because I was trying to get schema-based multi-tenancy, but spent a bunch of time spinning my wheels on that. So I ended up moving to just using something like that this tenant instead.
So I can see that it is using linear now.
Yep.
And and talking to linear.
Yeah, so we can see it found some of these issues here. TRA 204, 190. Actually found quite a few.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, did it save it somewhere? No, it did not. It actually has a pre-filled prompt for me. There you go.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
There
save
you
that.
go.
I always love these flibber gibbeting.
I know. And I see that you're using Opus 4.5 here for this. Is that pretty much what you're using for everything these days?
Yeah. Opus 5 is 4.5 has been such a game changer when it came out. I've been really enjoying it. Though I do wonder, like, if for documentation generation, if you need something like that, you could maybe move down to like a haiku or something like a little cheaper for some of that stuff.
It's a good point. Opus 4.5 for code has been really great, but yeah, it's probably worth experimenting whether it's necessary for documentation.
Must be a very big file.
I was gonna say either that or it's regenerating it
Oh yeah.
again in order to save it, which I suppose
Well,
is possible.
yeah. let's scroll through what we have so far. Okay, yeah, there's a lot. Okay, so again, another document version. So we see it didn't really give it an ID, so kind of that um, non-determinism for the model kind of shows up here where it's a little different in the formatting. So
So that might
that
be
might be
something we want to add to the skill
exactly,
prompt if we
yeah,
really want that every time.
right. It's now using mermaid, so nice in the sense that that'll give us nicer diagrams, but not as nice. We can't really totally read it this way,
Yeah.
just in the code. um,
I also had a case, and this was a while ago, so it may be better now, where it was actually the LLM was generating mermaid diagrams that weren't valid.
oh
And there was
yeah,
no way
I've
to
had that
tell
too.
by looking at the markdown.
Yep. Um, yep. Interesting that it's talking about that again. All right, detailed. So the agentic DHF processor, primary orchestrator. Yep. Design pattern agentic loop with bounded iterations. That's correct. And so we can see, even though we can't see the visual, we can see like it's identified some participants. So that there's a job, the extraction job. It's labeled ADP as the agentic DHF processor. So it's identifying all the participants of the system, drawing out the loop. Oh, geez. Oh, great. Even better. Oh, yeah. That whole time it was just kind of like generating it to have us approve it. All right. While we go look at that, I'm going to clear this because my context window is getting pretty full. In docs, SDS. All right, so let's jump back down to there. All right, and yeah, that there's iterations, what tools are going to be called, how it's recorded, and some key responsibilities. So manages multi-turn agentic conversation with Claude Sonnet, has 10 max iterations. We can see here now it's done a good job of like finding the pieces that make up this whole module. So like not just one class, but like, okay, almost like a feature set as a whole of like, okay, let's document how this feature or core functionality works. And so it's identified all the tools that we provide to the LLM and what they do. Let's see if we find those linear issues. Confidence scoring rubric. Yep. So now it goes into the details for the individual services. So the similarity search. So I'm using PG Vector to do that. The extraction builder. This is all good. All right, perfect. So here's some table definitions. So it did what we asked. It's not using raw SQL to diagram or tell us what those models look like or anything like that. So that's nice. More tables. The actual calls of how the service objects interact. Traceability links. So basically we have to, as part of DHF extraction, when we do find, say, design input or user need, we have to make traceability links to link them together so we know the relationships. And so that's where like something like Tracewell, if we integrated some of this into it, we could then point to all of these things as part of Tracewell's project also. And here we have some external connections, what the API requests actually look like, webhooks, how they're processed. Okay, and here's the traceability links with the linear issues. So yeah, it found all of those, what the title of the issue was, its status, and the relevance. So here's where it's saying relevance core approval workflow, workflow template configuration. So it did a pretty good job of finding those traceability links also. Security considerations, all things. So another thing that like would be potentially useful is threat modeling. That's another piece that's important as part of your submission is also like how did you assess your software and like determine what threats might be applicable to you and how you might remedy them. So that could be another interesting thing to add inside of this as well.
And I think for those who haven't been exposed to this before, oh, you said it at the beginning. There's a lot here. This is a lot, right? And this is exactly why there's the promise of using these tools to do this kind of thing, because doing it by hand is
Exactly.
a lot.
Yeah, if you imagine how long it would have taken to generate all of this by hand, manually at a high confidence and high quality, it'd be a long time.
Mm-hmm. And then keeping it up to date.
Exactly. Where should we go from here? What do you think?
I'm curious what that threat modeling would
Do some
look
threat
like.
modeling?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it. I think also since we're going to update it anyway, let's maybe come up with like a standard template
Mm-hmm.
also for what these should look like. So let's do that too. So Claude. Let's do this. I actually like the one that Claude skills it did before. Let's grab this. And perfect. All right. 6 threat modeling. Identify any potential, what's the word I'm looking for? Vulnerabilities or ways an attacker may attempt to exploit the system and how we attempt to protect against them. Templates. Use the following template whenever you create an SDS document. Actually, you know what? This is actually maybe a good example to reference. See references template.md
Yeah,
for
that's
templates.
a good way to do it.
Of SDS document. We can kind of show that in action. So .claude skills SDS. So we can have another folder in here, references, and we'll call it template.md. And I like this as an example. So we'll say title, that's the author. Title. Oops. And that, yeah, we'll leave that as placeholders, version, date. We're going to kill that in this. And we do want document control. So let's there. Have a table of contents. Actually, I could leave those.
I think leaving them as links probably will tell it to link them.
Yeah.
Otherwise.
And then 7 threat modeling. And actually, it probably needs to make a link there. So we'll do that. That's what 7 threat modeling. Yep. Anything else we want to bring this? Approval. That's another good one. So let's say body. And okay, so I think that's good. SDS skill. And I think actually another thing we should probably actually instruct here is actually give it information. Document control. When generating updated documentation, do not overwrite the existing documentation. Instead, make incremental changes and document them in the document control table. Include a version, date, author, and description of changes. Okay. Wanna let it rip?
Yeah, let's do it. And for
All
those
right.
who are just tuning in, what we're doing is we are writing Claude skills to be able to automatically generate and then keep up to date these FDA required documentation for software as a medical device systems. And so we've just made pretty significant iteration on what we had. And I really like the finding the example of being able to introduce the markdown template. That's a really good way of being like, we've got this other file over here that was a template. We don't want to necessarily include it in line, right? In the thing, it can be maintained as its own template, essentially in the repo too.
All right, so I gave it a new piece to look at. It's the approval workflow. Let's see how that goes. The other nice thing about documentation, I think, is that it also helps the LLMs themselves, like having some of this documentation aside, because it helps provide that context to help them understand how the code works and functions. So it gives them that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the only the thing that basically the one problem that you sort of run into is the context, the size of
Yeah,
the context, and running out of room, basically.
for sure.
So that's where like some techniques for that can be, well, one is the one that's built into the way Skills is doing it with the YAML front matter, which is providing guidance. And you can be like, okay, well, how might I do that in my documentation? One would be creating well-named subdirectories where the documentation is, so that, because if you notice, a thing Claude Code does a lot is grep and run file to like see what the things are. And so that's one thing where you can do well-named directories and file names. Then basically Claude will find just those files and only read those files it thinks are most relevant in the documentation, so that you're not immediately filling your context with absolutely everything.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think, yeah, I feel like these agents, coding agents, can highlight like poor documentation or poor like quote code organization or anything that like just kind of amplifies it without it, and then you run into issues.
Yeah. One of the things that I came across recently, which was like really interesting, and it hadn't happened before. I don't know if it's happened to you, but I was using Claude Code to make some changes, and it was like a fairly straightforward refactoring of like renaming a bunch of things, and it did like the first two, quote unquote, like by hand, and then it was like, okay, I've got what the changes are. I'm gonna write a sed script
Yep.
to make the rest of the changes, and I was like, whoa, okay.
How did it do?
So it wrote the said script. I let it do it because it's part of experimentation and learning. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, is that actually going to work? And what it did was it ran the said script, and then it read the files that it expected it to change, and it looked, and the said script had messed up one of the files. So then the agent was able to say, "This didn't work. I'm going to fix this one file by
Nice.
hand, but the rest of them look good."
That's awesome.
But yeah.
Okay, great. All right, let's go and oops. Oh, no, my bad. Bim. There we go. Cool. Okay, so we can see it's following our template. We've got our title. It kept the ID, has the date, and here is our document control. So that's great. Table of contents for all the pieces. So that's good. And let's take a look. So approval workflow provides configurable multi-reviewer approval process. Yep. And compliance. Yep.
So the compliance parts, is that something that you have documented, or is it generating that?
It's been generating that on its own. I hadn't actually
Yeah.
explicitly told it to say like, "Hey, do this thing." But because I mentioned, say, 510K software as a medical device, it knows that those are the related CFRs that the FDA
Mm-hmm.
has for these things.
Mm-hmm. And I'm looking at like line 50 through 52, and wondering whether those are accurate or not.
Let's take a look. Pretty sure. Google that real quick. Yeah, 82 820.30 is the design controls. Yeah. These are some more of the same, some architecture overviews. What I'm curious about really is the threat modeling, because that's the other new piece we added.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Okay, here we are starting with secure. Oh, wait.
The security
Yeah.
controls is a new.
Yep. Acquire authenticated users. So this is inaccurate.
That's
We don't
wrong.
use device. So human review is still needed.
Mm-hmm. Is it using Pundit?
That that's a good question. I don't even remember. Yes.
Okay.
Da, da, da. Audit logging, that's correct. Traceability, related issues. Okay, threat modeling. Here we go. Stride analysis. Cool. So spoofing. Attacker impersonates reviewer. Device authentication required. So, I mean, it is true. Authentication is required. It's just not device.
Mm-hmm.
And session-based identity. Reviewer ID manipulation requests. Yes, we do review memberships. That's right. Tampering. Modify reviewer sequence after creation. So we have a validation on update and audit logging. That's correct. Bypass required reviewer check. Database level non-null constraints. Yeah. And model validations. That's right. Tamper with review status. So if someone does change it somehow, there's an audit log. Repudiation. Reviewer denies approval action. Audit log captures the state. So that's right. Denies template modification. Template changes. Yeah. So another like important piece is even if you can't necessarily fully mitigate something or like, prevent it, having that documentation or like that logging, audit logging is very important to know like
Mm-hmm.
what things happened within the system along the way.
For something like this, I think it can be a little bit, so much is being generated for the first time. it's easier to look at what's there and say, oh, that's correct, but you might not realize what hasn't been added.
That's true. That's true.
And so I think that's where one area where either human review can come in, but you can also do a specific second pass prompting
Yes,
to be like, here's the things that we've generated. Can you go back through and verify that nothing is missing?
absolutely. There's our document approval.
Yeah, it's really intent on using devise.
It is. In this pass,
should-
the auth pass, it did not say devise, but for whatever reason, it decided now it's like, hey, there's devise. So actually, kind of like to your point, I wonder what's maybe a way to, now that the threat modeling is complete, not threat modeling, SDS documentation for approval workflows is complete, have a sub agent do a review of the documentation for factual correctness, as
that might
well
also
as
see whether it detects the devise problem.
that's kind of what I want to see. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. And in theory, given the instructions that we've already given it, it should just do particular changes, not regenerate.
Correct. And potentially add a changelog entry if it does make changes.
This might take a little while for it to go through everything and verify everything.
Have you found yourself automating any documentation yet on your end with these types of things?
Yeah, and in fact, I'm about to do a thing where I generate user-facing documentation for the first time.
Nice.
Basically, doing a first pass of an online knowledge base for a piece of software. Basically, being like, okay, here, document what things like profile images, what size should they be, stuff like that. And I'm certain it's going to work, but it's the first time that I've done user-facing documentation.
Sure.
Using it, and I think
cool.
that's really interesting.
One thing I'd like to experiment with at some point is like generating documentation using either Claude's like new like Chrome extension where like you can use Claude Code in Chrome, or like something like Playwright and see like if it could like go through visually and then generate like user facing documentation in some way like that. Let's see. Review results. High quality and mostly accurate. I found 3 factual errors, 5 documentation gaps, and 2 diagram inconsistencies. Okay, all low severity. Sequential order validation. Documentation combines 2 separate validations into one. The code produces distinct errors for uniqueness. CSV. Okay, so it has not found the devise thing. Funny enough.
Unless you're wrong and it actually does use
yeah. I forgot. I'm using devise. So there's that. Architecture diagram has no connections, but should connect to, okay. Missing information. All right, sure, this is missing, but I don't know how important that is that it's not documented. Lock logic states it calculates lock state, but it doesn't explain the algorithm. First incomplete. Okay, that makes sense. That should be in there. Reviews, architecture diagram, document and puzzle. Yes. Also, double check. I'll just also, I noticed we reference devise. This is incorrect.
At least it's verifying
That's true.
and not just taking you saying it's incorrect. I actually think that that might be one way that actually basically all of the LM providers have started to tweak the way that they interact with people is because this is a change that I think we've seen over the last 6 months. When you say something like that, it doesn't just automatically say, "Oh, you're right." It
You're
actually in
absolutely
Claude
correct.
Code, it starts searching.
Yeah. Okay, great. Look, it's adding a new version in our table. So that's great.
Mm-hmm. Adam says, is it possible that it's added a lot of device code and just hasn't noticed it's not in the gem file? I think that that's probably not likely because you said it. You're using has, sorry, what is it called? Has authenticated
Has
password.
secure password.
Has
Yeah,
secure
the
password.
built-in Rails auth flow.
I wonder. I'm wondering. Have you run into problems where this documentation itself starts to get too big?
Yes, I would say so. So I think in one way, so the pieces like say the threat modeling, things like that, I probably wouldn't have that in say per module documentation. I'd probably have like a separate threat modeling document that then captures all of it in separate sections. And so probably you could probably resolve that potentially by um, you know, updating the template, the skill to say, okay, put threat modeling in this file, put these things in this file, like have it kind of like break it out in that way. Would be interesting also is to like maybe have like a table of contents somewhere that you can then just like link out to each piece.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. And where did it say? Okay. Place all references device with the actual custom session-based authentication. Great. Even for some of this, like I probably would have like it's almost repeating the authentication documentation that we already generated. It'd be like nicer if it like referenced say like, oh, see authentication for information about auth, because like it really shouldn't be going into that much detail about how authentication works inside the approval workflow side of things. Yeah. Where should we go from here?
Well, one thing I was thinking of is showing how these skills can tell it how to run commands. And I was thinking, what's a good command to run? So
well, technically
one might be if we wanted to generate like PDFs of this document, but I don't know if your computer's set up to do that.
Oh, no, I don't think it is.
Okay. But
so you mean like kind of like custom
of the
scripts?
Kind of thing you can do is tell it how to generate PDFs, for example, from a markdown file. But you had an idea for something?
No. I was gonna say, I got confused by what you were mentioning because you mentioned the tool. I was like, oh, the linear MCP, that is calling a tool, but you mean kind of like more like the bundle that scripts inside of a skill that it can then run. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there another example of that? I'm trying to think. Yeah. What would we need to try to generate a PDF from this? Do you know off the top of your head?
Actually, it's interesting. It says available. I'm looking at Claude documentation, and it says it already has a pre-built agent skill for PDF generation.
Really?
But I don't know if that's from Markdown or not.
Well,
We
before
could
we do
just
it in the
ask and see what
skill,
it does.
yeah, exactly. Let's try it outside of the skill. Now create a PDF from this document. Pandoc. Oh, okay. Seems like it's just trying to use bash and which pandoc. Okay, great.
Okay.
You're going to install it for me. Okay. Oh, no, it's looking at brew. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So nothing's installed.
All right, let's do it.
Exciting. Yeah. So you were saying, so within a skill, you can have a scripts directory, and then you can have scripts, basically command line scripts that it can run to do things.
Correct.
So like one of the examples that it has if in the documentation is even like filling out forms. So like this is a bad example because you have a linear MCP. But for example, if you didn't have that and you wanted to be able to create a ticket with your skill, you could potentially have like a command line program that creates tickets.
That's correct. All right.
Oh, so a better example would be if you used GitHub issues, being able to empower it to use the GitHub command line client to do things.
That's right. All right. Pandoc. Okay, yep. Easy print. Approval. Okay, so first it made it from Markdown to HTML, and now it's going from HTML to PDF. That makes sense.
Everything okay over there?
I think my camera dropped for some reason.
There you are.
There we go. I don't know why it's all washed out though.
Yeah. It's interesting what it's doing with going from Markdown to HTML, because Pandadoc definitely does have the ability to do Markdown directly.
Oh, interesting. Now it's trying yet another library. npm install gmd to PDF.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Let me resize that so it fits on the here. Okay, that's pretty good actually. The table, do these links work? They do.
What about a mermaid diagram? Is that
Ooh, do we have one of those in here? Let's see. Oh no, unfortunately did not.
Yeah. But this is an example of the kind of thing of if working out, okay, here's how we generate PDFs, you can then memorialize that in a script that the skill knows how to run. So it's not having to completely generate how it does it every time.
Even at the code samples, that's pretty nice. Yeah, and I'm sure like in that script you could have it use Mermaid to actually save the images and then embed those into the HTML and things like that too.
Right.
Pretty cool. All right, here. What should we do next? Got architecture. Oh, should we try to break up multiple doc files?
Sure. Yeah.
All right. As a template, file organization, store documentation in docs/SDS. Maintain a single threat modeling document that is updated that is versioned. Maintain a table of contents document. What else?
I would say something like don't or minimize duplication between the documents, prefer linking to the relevant document, something like that.
I like that. What else? Let's have a maintain a single traceability matrix document. That seems pretty good. So STS document, let's start with authentication again. And have it now start making that single point of truth for that.
Yeah, and I forget which ones we had linear for and which ones we didn't.
We didn't set up linear when we did the auth version, so this will be the first time it has that.
So while that goes, I think that there's a lot of interesting possibilities here. When in addition to like, what would it look like to do this kind of thing to help a product manager generate release notes on a regular basis? Like even beyond just the regulation and the regulated industries, like what are other things that this can help us do? And way back when we first started doing this stream, I had a Thoughtbot product manager on who wanted to do release notes, and the tooling was very rudimentary. We were basically, there was no MCP didn't even exist yet, and so like we were having our LM generate scripts to talk to Trello, to the scripts to talk to Trello, pull the tickets that were done down in the last, and like it was a lot of manual work, and a lot of those pieces are just in place now.
Yeah.
So even if you so even outside of creating SDS documentation, there's some pretty compelling use cases for skills, I think.
For sure. Somewhat an experiment where I never tried it. The Playwright MCP is nice if you haven't used it before for like interfacing with the browser. The problem is like it uses a lot of context. and they built a skill to use Playwright using scripts, so that way you didn't have to have so much context getting taken up. So that was another interesting piece.
We actually have a blog post I shared with you that someone at Thoughtbot created a skill for doing a Thoughtbot style code audit of a Rails app, loading in some of the books that we have and the guides that we have and that kind of thing in a set of skills. That's going to be going out in a blog post soon talking about that. So that's another area.
Cool. Yeah, I saw there's been a couple, like the Vercel just released their like React guidelines one, which is nice. The one that Anthropic released on their site for like front end skills or front end design skill was super useful because it helped like get away from like that generic kind of LLM generated design.
So Adam asks, would it be fair to say that the conceptually special thing about a skill versus just an instructions.md is the idea that the skill strengthens through use because well-crafted utility modules accumulate in the skill?
I think that's one part of it. Yeah. There's some of the context window helping pieces also.
Yeah.
You can share them across different repos as well.
Yeah, I think in practice, being able to create really pretty specialized things without having to worry that they're entirely everything you're doing is loaded into context all of the time is the thing. And that shareability, not only across repos, but across team members too. They're like the new dot files, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, Adam, that's the other thing is like that you can get really well crafted utility modules baked into the skills and have relative confidence that you can build up that big library of skills and not have to worry about them all being loaded into context every time you start Claude. That's sort of what we're saying there, to reiterate that. Well, it's looking like it's doing what we asked.
Yeah, we've got one traceability matrix, an index, the auth file. And the threat modeling one. So here's our index. The master index for all software design specifications. Yep. Okay, cool. So now it's linking out to the modules. So auth, approval. Oh, that's cool. I found the one that we kind of already had before.
And it has the version numbers there too, which matches what had been generated.
Yeah. A nice like high level dependency map. That's interesting. Okay, so off to approval. Yeah. Plan documents. Okay.
That's funny.
Came up with a plan for some future docs, I guess, based off what we don't have yet. Applicable standards, design control. Okay, document conventions. That's nice. Okay. If we go here, very similar to before. Yeah. So I'm kind of curious. So we have approval workflow. Did it change this at all? Yeah, all the threat modeling still here. So we'd have to probably, I guess, tell it to do that. Here's all the authentication module threats. Okay, it did categorize them though, bring them in, so that's nice. All the approval workflow module threats, attack surface summary, some compliance mapping. Nice. What does this look like? Cool. That worked pretty well.
Can you, at the bottom of that one you were just in, what was it? Was that authentication? Or
I think I was in the traceability matrix, this one.
what's that document approval block is empty?
So basically, because no one's gone through and approved it. So typically you want to have an approval process for your documents as well.
Yep.
Cool. What was also interesting, I think, to your point of like, not just documentation, was one of the things, we had to do was like penetration testing. So we had to like manually kind of like think through like, okay, what type of things should we focus on in the penetration test and like build that out. So like you could imagine like using a skill like this to like help you like trace through the code and be like, okay, what are the important places to potentially aim for during a penetration test to compile that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this I think is really solid. I mean, it seems solid to me. What's your take, Damian?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely solid. Obviously, there's some things to clean up around things like, so for instance, where was it? So like again, like I mentioned, these are kind of like made up. It just kind of decided these were some required numbers. So you want to be able to like actually tie those to real things. But otherwise, like most of this is um, pretty accurate. And even if you do still have to do some manual like review, like even just having this kick started as like a start jumping off point to like go through is like such a huge time saver versus having to like I said, manually go through and document all of these things on your own. It's just such a tedious process.
Yeah. Well, I hope folks enjoyed this sort of crash course in Claude skill creation through the lens of this SDS documentation. We will be back next week to work on something else. I'm not quite sure what yet, but please tune in next week, same time. And Damian, thanks again for stopping by and sharing this with us. It's really powerful.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
So once again, you started streaming on your own as well, and that YouTube channel is linked in the notes for this. But if folks want to follow along or get in touch with you or anything like that, where's all the best places for them to do that?
Yeah. So like you said, YouTube is at dgalarza86, and I'm usually at dgalarza everywhere else.
Awesome. And as always, Thoughtbot is available to help if you've got this kind of challenge in front of you, or you're creating something new or improving an existing product, especially in a highly regulated industry like healthcare. We're here to help, and definitely get in touch at thoughtbot.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again, Damian.
Thank you.